In May of 2024, the VA changed the rating criteria and it changed the way that it rates IBS, also known as irritable bowel syndrome. In this video, we're going to discuss the old rating criteria, the new rating criteria, why VA made these changes, and how these changes may impact your IBS rating or your IBS claims. My name is Greg. I'm a disabled veteran turned VA disability lawyer, and I've been practicing VA disability law for over a decade.
I'm Victoria. Thanks for joining us for today's video. Let's get started. Like Greg said, we're going to talk about the changes for the IBS rating criteria. We're going to start with going over the old criteria. So most people who are currently rated would have been rated under this criteria. Greg?
So this is the old rating criteria. As you can see, VA didn't have a specific diagnostic code for IBS, so they rated by analogy to irritable colon syndrome, which essentially, I believe, is the same thing, but you'll see that's diagnostic code 7319. And previously, you could have a 30% rating, a 10% rating, or a 0% rating. And in general, they rated the severity by either severe, moderate, and then mild. And you'll see that they define each one. So to get a 30% rating for severe IBS, you would have to have diarrhea or alternating diarrhea and constipation with more or less constant abdominal distress. To get a moderate 10% rating, you would just have to have frequent episodes of bowel disturbance with abdominal distress. And to get a 0% mild rating, you would have to have disturbances of bowel function with occasional episodes of abdominal distress.
And we addressed what rate by analogy means in our GERD video. If you didn't see that, then you can go watch that. But will you explain what that means when the VA rates by analogy?
Sure. Rating by analogy is when the rating schedule doesn't contain a diagnostic code for your specific disability. And so VA is instructed by the regulations to just rate your disability to the closest diagnostic code that matches up with your disability symptoms.
Okay. And so for IBS, a lot of the symptoms overlap or are the same as what you just explained for irritable colon syndrome?
Yeah, and an irritable colon syndrome is an old type of diagnosis, and so it's primarily always just called IBS now.
Okay, so now let's go over the new rating criteria.
All right, so here's the new rating criteria. You'll see it now has its own diagnostic code, IBS, under diagnostic code 7319. And as you can see, we now have similar ratings, but a little bit different. We have a 30% rating. We have a 20% rating, which we did not have before. And we have a 10% rating. You'll notice that there is no 0% rating listed here. However, if you don't meet the criteria for 10, you'll be given a 0%. They just don't write it out because there's really no need to. So let's go through these. Starting at the top for a 30% rating, you have to have abdominal pain related to defecation at least 1 day per week during the previous 3 months, and 2 or more of these following 6 symptoms, which are change in stool frequency, change in stool form, altered stool passage, such as straining or urgency, mucorrhea, which is mucus in your feces, abdominal bloating, or subjective distension. And then moving down to the 20% rating criteria, the only thing that really changes is the frequency of how often you have abdominal pain related to passing stool. And so you have to have that at least 3 days per month during the past 3 months. And then plus 2 or more of those same 6 symptoms that we just discussed. And finally, to get a 10% minimum compensable rating, you have to have abdominal pain related to defecation at least once during the previous 3 months and 2 or more of the symptoms. So really all these ratings are all the same. You have to have at least 2 of those 6 symptoms. The only difference between each level is how often you have abdominal pain related to going to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike the GERD change, I'm not mad at this. I think this is a good change. One, there's a way to get a 20% rating,
Right.
even if it's not severe. So that's helpful. And I understand why VA did this because the old rating criteria was really vague.
And the old rating criteria for the 30% said near constant pain. Whereas this, putting a number on it, I feel like the number seems a lot less than near constant.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't have to be constant now. To get that 30% rating, you have to have abdominal pain. Only 1 day per week.
Yeah.
Which I'm service connected for IBS at 30%. It's pretty bad. It's not as bad as many people, but I feel like this criteria is going to be easier to meet than that constant criteria in the old rating criteria.
Yeah. If you're having stomach pain once a week, that's not going to correlate in your mind to constant. So that seems, more lenient actually than the former rating criteria.
Right. And, a good way to document that and all these symptoms, we've discussed a lot the importance of lay statements.
Uh-huh.
Obviously you're not going to go to your doctor every time you have an episode of IBS. They're going to be like, yeah, we know you have IBS, change your diet or there's nothing we can do for you. So, you could start kind of like a migraine log. You could start a feces log and
Track everything.
when you have pain, what your stool is like, if you had straining or urgency, if there's any mucus, track your bloating.
Uh-huh.
And that can help you get this maximum 30% rating.
Okay. Well, since the symptoms really are the same and overlap with the former irritable colon syndrome, why did VA effectuate a change? What was the reasoning?
They wanted to be more up to date with current medical science, and irritable colon syndrome is a diagnosis that's not really used anymore.
Okay.
It's diagnosed as IBS, and then there's other, more specific gastrointestinal disorders that also have their own diagnostic code. And so VA just really wanted to update it to be current with the current medical science, and they wanted more specificity at symptoms. And I'll bring up the old rating criteria again, just to compare how vague it was. So here's the old criteria again. It's just super vague, like severe, moderate, mild, and what is abdominal distress. No one really knows. It's something that's moderate to me. Someone else may call severe, and so I'm really okay with this change. The GERD change, not happy about. This I can work with. It kind of just lays out in more detail exactly what symptoms you have to have, how often you have to have them, to get that 30% or 20% criteria.
And something that we've talked about before in our previous videos is that the purpose of VA disability compensation is, in fact, to compensate people whose ability to earn income is being impacted. So having these more objective and, numeric measures of how it's actually affecting you in the workforce. If you're in constant pain, that's going to have more of an impact on you than if you are having abdominal distress once a week. And so to have it be so much clearer, it's easier to understand how it could actually impact you at a job.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the commenters to the proposed regulation change asked VA to actually add a rating higher than 30%, because a lot of people felt that some people's IBS is severe, can't leave the home for more than 10 minutes without risk of defecating in their pants. And 30% for someone like that's extremely low. And they suggested that VA add a 50% rating with some type of component where, if you have severe IBS that impacts your ability to work, you can get a 50% rating.
What was the VA's response to that?
They declined to do it. They said they think this is sufficient. And for those really severe cases, the veteran can ask for an Extra-Schedular rating, which for those out there that don't know what an Extra-Schedular rating is, there's a regulation that allows VA to kind of go outside the rating schedule and assign a higher rating, in this case, something higher than 50%, where a veteran's disability symptoms aren't adequately contemplated by the rating schedule. So in those really severe cases, you can always ask for an extra schedular rating. I will say VA is stingy about giving those out. The local regional offices don't really understand the process, and their knee-jerk reaction, as always when they don't understand something, is to just deny it.
Yeah.
And so extra schedular cases usually require going up to the board.
And I don't know if you know the answer to this, but are really severe cases of IBS like that, what you're describing, is that super rare?
It's not rare. Some people have, we have a client right now who literally can't leave their home because of how bad their IBS is. And we're arguing for an extra schedular rating. We're in the process of winning unemployability based on their IBS. So there's definitely cases out there. So many Gulf War veterans have IBS, burn pits, toxic exposure in the Gulf, Afghanistan have been linked to gastrointestinal disorders, specifically IBS. That's when mine started. And so there are a lot of people out there who have IBS. And yeah, some of them have really severe cases.
Okay. So there is, it's possible to get a rating higher than 30%, or like you said, potentially TDIU if it's completely preventing you from working.
Absolutely.
All right. What does this mean for folks that already have IBS ratings?
So if you already have an IBS rating under the old rating criteria, this does not impact you. VA is not going to take away your old rating and say, hey, we're rating it like this now, we're going to reduce you. So you're good to go if you already have your rating. You can, of course, apply for an increased rating under the new criteria if you think you can get a higher rating under the new criteria. And then for those people who had an active claim or an appeal that spans the date of this change, which was May 19th, 2024, they're entitled to the more favorable rating, with the caveat that if the more favorable rating is the new criteria, you can only get that new favorable criteria from May 19th forward. So, if you qualified for a 10% rating under the old criteria, you'd have that from the start of your claim up until May 19th. And then you qualify for 30% under the new criteria, you'd have a staged rating of 30% from May 19 forward. If the old criteria is more favorable, you can have that from the beginning of your claim actually past the date of the new criteria.
Forever?
Yeah.
Okay. So you potentially, if that's more favorable, then you're grandfathered into that criteria.
Exactly.
Okay.
And a question I've been asked a bunch on this topic is, if you had an intent to file filed before the new rating criteria went into effect, and then you submitted your formal claim after the criteria, are you allowed to be rated under the old criteria? And the answer is yes. That the ITF governs the date of your claim. So if the ITF was before the new criteria, you could be rated under the old criteria.
All right. Anything else people should know about this change?
Not really. I think it's an okay change. I think it adds a little more specificity, which I don't mind. It's not like the GERD rating criteria, which I encourage you to go watch our GERD video if you haven't already, where we broke down the changes with that. Yeah, I think this is an okay change. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you found this useful, and please like and subscribe as we continue to post videos to help you maximize your VA benefits.
See you next time.